Well, we asked them a series of questions. Firstly, one was around issues faced in discrimination generally in terms of service provision, and unfortunately it was around 45% of people had said they had faced some type of discrimination in that realm. And then, of course, about violence, harassment and bullying and the discrimination people had faced because on the basis of their sexual orientation, gender identity or intersex status, and we found around 75% of people had experienced some form of harassment, bullying or violence. These are, of course, very disturbing numbers, but to be quite frank, they're not new numbers. They're very similar to other reports and analysis that have been done, and one of the key recommendations of the report is to drill down and get more firm data that we can rely on to assess just how bad, the drivers, the impacts are of this type of violence and harassment and bullying, and also how we're going to seek to address it.
Talk to me about state-sanctioned discrimination. That's a pretty strong statement. So what do you mean exactly by that?
Well, what I mean by that is that most people use the word discrimination flippantly, and they talk about discrimination when they talk about interpersonal discrimination between people, institutional discrimination, which may occur in terms of the structures of society, and state-sanctioned discrimination, which is when the government does it, as though they're the same. They're not. State-sanctioned discrimination is a fundamental violation of the liberal and conservative principle of equality before the law, and it is utterly unacceptable in 21st century Australia that type of state-sanctioned discrimination used to deliberately disenfranchise or to alienate a section of the community is justified. We need to fight it in every aspect of society, like we did with other types of policies like the White Australia policy. But the problem with the state-sanctioned discrimination is that it can then licence discrimination in other realms of society and say it's okay. The government has sent the message that it's okay, that people cannot enjoy the same rights and respect as everybody else.
And at a federal level, as a result of this survey, you recommend an amendment to the Marriage Act. Does the Commission have a view about how the Marriage Act should actually be amended? Would a popular vote ahead of legislative change be useful in the Commission's view?
Well, we believe that people should be treated equally before the law. Now, if the government wishes to continue regulating marriage, they should treat same-sex couples equal to heterosexual couples. There are other proposals, of course, that have been put on the table around getting government out of marriage. In fact, if anybody goes back to the record, I have advocated that in the past, so I'm quite relaxed and calm about doing that. My principle is about equality before the law, and that is the human rights principle. I don't think there's a necessity to have a public vote on this. I think, firstly, a public opinion polling is very clear, but I think we have never applied that sort of test on basic principles of equality before the law in the past. But the report doesn't just deal with issues of marriage. It looks at lots of other issues that exist in terms of state laws and practice within different types of service provision to make sure that everybody is getting an equal treatment before government, and particularly in the health and the education space, where if you are somebody who's going to a doctor or a mental health practitioner on issues related to their sexual orientation or gender identity, there simply isn't enough education so that practitioners in the medical field can assist and help people with that, and that's where our focus is going to be.